I always feel like I'm in a rush. I want to get things done today rather than tomorrow. And I'm realizing that in development, there's also value and a hard truth in waiting, because when you wait, your project becomes more valuable. And because there's developments that could be in your favor, which in our case happened. Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today I'm going to be sharing part 2 on the hydro lines. If you listened to last week's episode, I'm going to give you a full update on exactly what's happening because there's been some developments in between the recording of the last and this week. So before I jump into it, as usual, thank you for subscribing. Refer this episode to a friend who's doing some development, who's interested in real estate investing in Quebec. The more people we can reach, the more we can help, the better we are. Before I go into it, I also want to invite everyone on September 21st. We're going to be hosting our second annual event at Bar George at the Mount Pleasant Club in Montreal downtown. This year, it's on revolutionizing industrial real estate investing. We have a lot of people who are like us doing some residential, who are also interested in industrial, and we're going to get some of the top best development gentlemen from Quebec, the two founders of Rose Fellow. It'll be a real pleasure. We'll interview them, and then we'll have some time to ask questions, mingle. We'll get about 70 high quality real estate investors and real estate professionals in the room. So if you want to be there, I will put the link in the show notes, and I will see you there. So going back to our issue with the hydro lines, if you've listened to last week's episode, good for you. You'll get more background. I will just give you a brief update for those whose first episode it is. Basically, we're building in a city north of Montreal, and we are having issues because we need to do some pilings. And basically, the hydro lines are exactly in the way of where we need to do our pilings. We need to go and put a big machine to go drill down, and it's exactly underneath the power lines. And those power lines are just electrical poles that are in the sidewalk. And they are it's medium tension. So it's 24,000 volts. And basically they come along the property line and then they go perpendicular. So along the sidewalk, along the street, and then they cross in two different points to power the university campus that's across the street. It's a 5-story building. And then another 3-story building, which is a large federal building. So 24,000 volts. So all of this came up when we reached out to Hydro-Québec to securize the lines. Like, how do you make it safe for us to work for? And then, oh my god, this is where, well, 24,000 volts, you can't make it safe. You can't work underneath it. You need to stay 3 meters away at all times, and it just doesn't work. So the building, the way it's been designed, fully meets code and all the distance restrictions. It's really hard for us to build. Also doing a bit of research in the city, this is one of the only stretch on that street where the lines aren't buried. Everything else in the downtown region of Saint-Jérôme, for the most part, has been buried, except on that stretch. So I'm trying to see with the city, hey, would they pay for it? And I'll bring up some of those conversations to let you know. So last week's episode was actually recorded around mid-July, and since then there's been a lot of new developments. And so what happened, we met with two gentlemen from Hydro-Québec and our director of construction to meet to see how we're going to deal with this. And basically what came up was there's no right way to do it. We just need to get rid of the lines. Otherwise we can't go piling. And in order to get rid of the lines, Hydro-Québec said, okay, we've taken all the measurements and all the distances. We're going to come back to you with a quote. So this is where it's new and it gets really interesting. So for those who are not familiar, but in Quebec, we have construction holidays, which is basically the last week. It used to be the last 2 weeks of July. Now it's the last week of July, first week of August. And it's a big milestone. A lot of people want to finish everything that they're working on before they go on vacation. And it happened exactly in that way, that on the last Friday before start of the construction holidays, I was actually picking up my son at summer camp. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, and I got that email from Hydro-Québec saying, so we've looked at the distances, we've looked at everything. We have a minimum requirement of, if we're going to bury the lines, it's a minimum of 300 meters. And for you, given your conditions, it's a minimum of, are you ready for the price? 2.2 million. And that does not include some of the soft costs in terms of we need to go back to the notary, there needs to be some servitudes, blah, 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 blah. So 2.2 million to move the line so we can get access to our land. I think you can just imagine the half heart attack I had when I was picking up my son. I should have never read that email when I was over there. It was a terrible mistake. And note to yourself, sometimes it's just better to not read your emails on your phone when you're outside doing stuff because it totally breaks it. So I nearly had a heart attack and I just said, this is crazy. It just makes no sense. We're trying to get them to move the line so we can build, because otherwise they're creating, to me, a prejudice where I can't fully enjoy my land because I can't build on it. So I wanted to see from a legal point of view, where are we at? But Hydro-Québec, they always take servitudes everywhere. And, going to court with them would be extremely difficult because they will bury me in legal fees. We just thought, look, we need to work with them. We need to work with whoever to find a solution on this. So the vacation went by. I replied to them and said, I just want to remind you, Hydro-Québec is a Quebec-owned company. Me, technically, as a taxpayer, I own part of the company. It doesn't make sense. We all know there's a housing crisis. I'm trying to add dwellings. You can't be charging me 2.2 million for me to get access to my land to go build a 16 unit. I mean, that's like a third of my construction price. And then I didn't hear anything. And then the vacations go by and I just thought, this is crazy. So I reached out to the mayor, which he didn't get back to me, but I got a hold of someone else from pretty high up there, which I won't name nor their position because I don't want them to be identified, reached out to me and was very receptive and said, we totally understand. This situation is crazy. Let's see how we can do this. And this person recommended that I actually reach out to the MP for the region, give me his name, give me all his information to work with Hydro-Québec to find a better solution. In the meantime, I continued working on the project. I continued because now we're also going to develop most likely the land next door, as I had shared, to build another 6-story building in partnership. We're in conversation with the university that's across the street to build some student housing for a number of reasons. It actually fits for the intended use. It fits for some of the requirements. And this is where, hard work and patience, and that's what I'm discovering in development, is that I always feel like I'm in a rush. I want to get things done today rather than tomorrow. And I'm realizing that in development, there's also value and a hard truth in waiting, because when you wait, your project becomes more valuable, and because there's developments that could be in your favor, which in our case happened. So first of all, Hydro-Québec, after the holidays around mid-August, came back and said, hey, we've looked at it with the team. We're not going to have to bury everything. We are going to keep part above ground, so on poles, and then part buried. And so now they send me a quote for basically 250,000 plus tax. So I think it comes down to like 275 or 280. But that's a budget that I'm going to have to pay for up front, which, guess what? I don't have an extra 300,000 right now. So I'm going to have to come up with a way. I'm going to still negotiate with Hydro-Québec to see if they can lower the price. I'm going to negotiate to see if the city would jump in for them to take some of that cost. There's a number of things that we're going to see how we can make it work. And at the same time, in continuing with the city and to say, look, if I need to pay to move those hydro lines, it makes my difficult project even harder. What can we do? And for those who've listened to the ongoing saga of this project, it's a PPCMOI, so PPCMOI, which stands for Projet Particulier, Changement, Modification. I always forgot what the O stands for and the I. Anyways, it's for when you submit a project that doesn't fit in the current zoning. There's a review process, then they accept it. But once it's accepted, you need to build exactly what was approved. It's like they make a little bracket in the zoning for you, And you have to do exactly that. So I went back to them and say, hey, because the project is really difficult, we might want to make some modifications and reduce the parking, because what's expensive in our project is that we have to do an underground parking for a 16 unit. It's very costly because the parking ratio is 1-to-1. So for each residential unit, you need to have one parking spot. So we're trying to find ways to reduce the cost of that underground parking. And the way it's designed, it's a rectangle with a square that's pushed into it, and then somewhere a triangle was added to make things simple. And we realized that if we get rid of that triangle, it would actually make a significant difference. So we would have to forego 2 parking spots, which means we need to reduce to 14 units. And the way we started to look at this was, let's get rid of the mezzanine and let's get the 3rd floor layout on the 4th floor, because then instead of having a 2-bedroom and then a 1-bedroom on the last floor, we had a large 5-bedroom. So we thought if we rework a little bit the layout, which is already existing, we just kind of rechanged the unit mix on certain floors, we could get to 14 units without doing too many spots. Therefore, it would justify getting rid of that triangle for those 2 spots. So I reached out to the city to say, hey, the project is really difficult, as you know. We're looking to maybe reduce to 14 units. What would be the process? Because our building permit has already been issued. The project has already been approved. It took us 8 months to get the building permit. And I just thought it would be, a letter in the mail and just like, oh, you want to reduce, it changes the scope a little bit. Sure, go do it, resubmit the plans and, a quick approval. But they said, no, in your case, because it was a special project, any modification you're going to make, even if you reduce, and this was my mistake, I thought it was difficult to increase, but I thought to reduce, they'll be okay with that. No. In any case, it needs to go back through the whole PPC-moi process. Okay, so that's probably around another 6 months. And this is where the cherry comes on. And they said, but hold on a second. We are reviewing right now the zoning. And for the downtown core, we want to give more density with less parking requirement. So that's a favorite of Bell to me. So all of a sudden I'm like, okay, wait a second. So you're saying that I might be able to get more units with less parking. So the way I translated this was, well, I could keep the same amount of parking, so currently 16 spots, but maybe I'd be able to go to 20 units or 25 units. So hold on a second, that changes things a lot. And that's more or less where we're at now, is that we're discussing with the architect, because obviously we need to go back to architecture. And once we finalize the architecture, we're going to have to go back to engineering, structural engineering, civil engineering, electromechanical engineering, fire prevention. I think I'm forgetting one. So I've built now a model, a pro forma on 20 units and 25 units. And obviously the bigger it gets, the sexier the project, because everything that needs to be done for the underground parking, the excavation, the decontamination, the piling, whether you do 16, 20, or 25 units, you need to do it. So you're better off stacking more units on the same plot and on the same fixed cost to get the underground, basically. So now we are going to most likely resubmit to the city with 25 units up from 16 for the same amount of parking, which makes a huge difference. And when we look at construction cost, it goes up, but not that much. So the project is getting better and better. And the way I'm also going to present it to the city, and is just the but honest truth, is that if we have to pay for the whole 280,000 of moving the hydro line, so 250 plus tax, I need to incorporate more units, because otherwise that cost makes it prohibitive. And especially if we're also going to be developing next door, then, work with me to make those projects work. So this is what happened basically in about a month and a half or 2 months. This is a lot of phone calls, a lot of emailing, a lot of talking to the city, to Hydro-Québec, to architecture, and so on and so forth. I still don't really know what's going to happen. And from a mental point of view, from an emotional point of view, we always say like, oh, in real estate, you need to be cold. It's just a transaction. It's just to build. It's actually really difficult, because I've put a fair amount of money into this and I don't really know when this is going to happen. I don't really know when I'm going to start to build. And originally, and for the last 8 months, a year, the plan was to start this fall. We're in no position to start this fall. We don't even have the financing. We can't pay for it. Like, everything's come to add up and add up. So now the new target is defreeze around March, April next year. I'd like to aim for April. And in order to do this, we basically need to go for financing by October, November, because right now, apparently with CMHC, it's about a 6 months delay because there was a huge rush for mid-June before they changed their insurance premium policy and so on and so forth. So we'll see how much has been worked through the system. 6 months to get a financing to start in March, I need to basically submit now. So we are going to rework the project to submit it to the city, because what the city said, and that's the loop I want to close, was we're working on the zoning. There's a lot of requests for more density. We're going to give more density, less parking requirement. And right now, to save projects to go on PPC Moi, we're collecting all the projects that are in the works. We're going to incorporate them in the zoning so it gets approved right away. And then it'll greatly speed up the approval process. So that's kind of where we're at. So now we need to submit by mid-September to the city, basically the same project with 2 more floors, to get the whole thing approved. I don't want to say hope for the worst and work for and try for the best. I'm not sure exactly. I forget what the saying is. I hope for the best. I plan for the worst, but I hope for the best. We'll see how it goes. It's the joy and the scary part of development. And at the same time, it's super exciting because, hey, we may be taking a 16 project to 25 units. I'll just let you imagine. If this gets approved, I'll give you a full rundown on the numbers, because obviously it greatly changes the valuation. So once the city says it's a green light, I need to update my evaluation. So I'll go back to my evaluator and ask him to reopen the file and give them all the specs, all the plans for them to be able to rework out what would be the new projected value. So there's a lot of steps. And of course, for me, it also means more soft costs, because now I need to go back to architecture, engineering. There's going to be some extra costs. I'm thinking an extra like 30, 40K easily. And I'm starting to really run low, but I will find a solution. I always have, and I will. And in a way, I don't have the choice. I've already put so much money into this. Like, I have to make it work. And I believe in my mission, as I've shared with you before. I want to build housing. This province of Quebec needs more dwelling. We've only built, according to La Presse, the article this week, only 12,000 units, whereas a regular year is, I think, about 60. So don't quote me on these exact numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but we need more dwellings. We have some immigration. We have population growth. We need more dwellings, and that's part of my mission now. So other than the podcast is for fun. I really love this, and it's pushed me to have fantastic, interesting conversations with guests every week, and sometimes to share my story and what we're working on. So this is it. So stay tuned. Give me some feedbacks. What do you think? And I'll let you know as soon as I can whether my 20 or 25 unit proposal gets approved by the city. And I've always vouched that I would share the reality of a real estate investor. It doesn't get more real than this. So thank you for tuning in. Share this episode with a friend who is interested in development and who you feel could benefit from these conversations. And I will talk to you next week. Thank you very much. Thank you for your dedicated listenership. And I will talk to you soon. Ciao.